Well, hello. Thanks for joining us, friends. On the show today, one of our good friends, Andrew Jones, rejoins the show again. He's been on the show a couple of times, but this time he has a very special announcement he would like to elaborate on. Today's episode is brought to you by Musical Surroundings. For over 30 years, Musical Surroundings has distributed high-performance analog playback equipment to vinyl enthusiasts and music lovers throughout the United States. Based in Oakland, California, Musical Surroundings represents world-class brands like Clear Audio, Hanna, DS Audio, and their own line of Musical Surroundings phono preamplifiers. To learn more about the exceptional turntables, cartridges, and analog accessories they offer, visit musicalsurroundings.com. That's musicalsurroundings.com. Today's episode is brought to you by WellPleasedAV. Importer Mark Sosa has hand-selected a remarkable collection of high-performance brands like Inuos, QLN, Marison, Qualiton, Gigawatt, and more. Each of these specialist manufacturers are driven by engineering products that communicate the lifeblood of music. Check out everything WellPleasedAV has to offer by visiting www.wellpleasedav.com. That's www.wellpleasedav.com. Yes, you're listening to The Occasional Podcast, our audio-centric, hi-fi loving conversations with influencers and important people in the industry. And Andrew Jones is one of those people, without a doubt. I think most people would agree that he has left a giant thumbprint on the landscape of high-fidelity audio, and especially with some of his brands, budget audio. And he'll talk about more of that in the interview. But the reason for his visit is actually quite special this time. Previously making budget speakers for Pioneer and then ELAC, the man behind the music has moved on to another partnership with another brand, and that brand is MoFi Electronics. Now, MoFi has his hand in a lot of things as well. They produce records, audiophile pressings with special releases, and they work with record labels and all this fun stuff, but they also, MoFi Electronics, makes their own products. So they managed to scoop up the legendary Andrew Jones to partner with him on a couple projects that we do not know what they are yet. But as to the question of why MoFi for Andrew Jones, this is one of the things I wanted to pose to him. So, as we say, on with the show. Here we go. Andrew Jones of MoFi. Today's episode is also brought to you by one of the originals in high-end audio, Purist Audio Designs. Purist Audio Design made the first fluid-shielded audio cable over 35 years ago and still makes them today right here in the U.S. For over 35 years, Purist Audio has connected you to the music. They passionately make high-end, high-crafted audio cables designed specifically to the needs of your system. They list their specs, such as resistance and shield quality, and you can find them at PURISTAUDIODESING.com. Purist Audio Designed is veteran-owned and available worldwide. Today's episode is also sponsored by SCHIIT Audio. SCHIIT Audio designs and builds audio components in California and Texas. Based in Valencia and Corpus Christi, their wide line of amps, DACs, and audio accessories fit any budget, starting at $49. For a full rundown of all their products, visit SCHIITdotCOM or stop by their retail store in Old Newhall, just north of Los Angeles. That's SCHIIT.com. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. The illustrious Andrew Jones.
Illustrious, wow.
That's right. Of so many companies I like to mention, but obviously the big ones, KEF, Pioneer fame, ELAC, and now
a new company, actually. I wanted to sit you down and chat with you because you have made another move. You kind of ended your last partnership with ELAC. I don't know, maybe it was a year around the end of the
About
pandemic,
a year
was
ago.
it?
Yeah.
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 And
End of pandemic? You mean it's over? Yay.
no, I meant to say the start of the pandemic. I wish it was the end of the pandemic. But then I think we spoke very briefly, and at the time you had said, I can't say. I'm talking to people. And now we're at the AXPONA 2022 audio show, and they've had an announcement that you will be working with MoFi, who is obviously has a record label, and they do pressings, but they also do consumer electronics. But traditionally, they've done turntables. I actually have one of their turntables. It's a wonderful turntable. And analog kind of preamp. I don't think they have any particular amps, but one thing they don't have is any type of speaker on the roster currently. So I wanted to kick off the conversation with saying, I'm assuming, one can only assume that once you ended your previous relationship, you were looking at quite a few options. Why MoFi, and why would you go with a company that primarily has no speaker equity, so to speak, in the market?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had fantastic time at ELAC. I always like to explore what's possible and ideas for different speakers and things. And I was really enjoying what I was doing at ELAC, but it was more of the lower priced speakers. And I love doing that. I love giving value for money and thinking that people can just go out and buy my speakers and enjoy it and get started in the hobby. But I wasn't doing high-end speakers. I wasn't doing really mid-range speakers. I kind of sort of got there with the Adante speaker. But with ELAC, we also have the design group in Germany. And they were already in the process of designing all the higher-end speakers. So it would look a bit odd if I was going to go, well, I want to do my version of a high-end speaker whilst Germany are also doing theirs. And they'd already designed the Concentro for their 90th anniversary, which is a really amazing speaker. So, it's kind of settled into doing this lower price point. And this opportunity came up with MoFi, sort of just a casual conversation once that made me think, oh, are they thinking of maybe doing speakers? It hadn't occurred to me that they might be doing that. I think most people think of it for the recordings and now the turntables, but MoFi is also MoFi distribution, where they bring in brands like Wharfdale and Quad and Piega. And then you got Music Direct for the direct sales. So when I thought, they're interested in speakers, that might be interesting. And it's a great group of guys there. I've known them for years because they've been selling my speakers. And so I got more and more interested in it. So we explored the possibility, and then COVID came. So it kind of, okay, let's put everything on hold because nobody will know what's going to happen. But working through the first year of COVID, let's say, we decided this would be a possibility. So around January time last year, I decided to make the switch, which is one of the hardest things I've done because the three of us came together from ELAC. Chris, who was product planner, and Jim, who was the sales guy, to create that ELAC Americas. And I was sort of leaving them behind. And it was a very sad day, that moment. Mm-hmm. But we're past that. We're still great friends, and we help each other out if we ever need to, just chit-chatting. And even at this show, it was so odd that this is the show where we're going to announce that I'm with MoFi, and we look at all the room layouts, and MoFi have a lot of rooms at the show, but you walk down the hallway, it's MoFi, 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 ELAC, MoFi, MoFi, kind of sandwiched right in the middle. So that was hugely funny, and I keep walking into the ELAC room, and if it's full, I walked in one time, and Chris goes, "See, Andrew, we don't need you to get a room full of people. So I got my own back a bit later. I walked in there with a room full of people and say, yeah, but you can't cheat by paying people to come and sit in this room. So, and I've met the new designer, and he's a great guy. We actually have a common history because he used to work at Pioneer Car Division down in San Diego, and I know other people who worked there as well. So we all had dinner together on Wednesday night and got to know each other better, and it's just fantastic. They made a great choice as someone to continue the work there. So we're all good, and so now I've spent nearly a year thinking about what to do. Yeah, it's always exciting, but a lot of trepidation when you start with a blank sheet. But let's say I'm considering to try somewhere, go somewhere else. And certainly with this announcement, people have been saying, he's jumped ship again. I go, what do you mean again? I've been 5 decades now, covering 5 decades of designing speakers. And, KEF was 11 years, and Pioneer/TAD was 17 years. ELAC was 6 years. The shortest span in all of that was at Infinity, which was 3 years. So I think I've got a decent track record of staying put. But you still, from time to time, you feel like exploring other things. But I remember when I started at Pioneer, it was literally, Andrew, you have a blank sheet of paper, come up with something. And that's very exciting. But you think, but what? What am I going to come up with? And even though I'm always thinking of all sorts of ideas, and I've always got ideas floating in my brain that I know will never be made by that company, it doesn't stop me thinking about them. And it's because maybe it doesn't fit in with the product categories that they do or the type of speaker that they do. But like in my brain, I'm always thinking about electrostatics because I had my very first exposure to real hi-fi was listening to music on ESL 57s at university. I became friends with this guy who was there to learn about physics because he was interested in hi-fi, and that's exactly why I'd started. So I go, and he's got this system in his room, so I go over to see it, and it's Quad 33303, preamp power amp, ESL 57s. Can't remember the turntable, Hadcock pickup arm, Decca London cartridge. And it was a revelation to me because I hadn't ever had anything that good. And certainly not the speakers I was designing as a kid. So, of which I never really finished anything, but that's a different story. That's why I went into research first. You don't have to finish things.
Yeah, you don't have to finish
well,
things.
It's true. I always had this saying that if I knew what I was doing, it wouldn't be research. So... and I became great friends with Peter Walker and was always kind of picking his brain on electrostatics. But anyway, so there's always ideas floating around. But what is it that you're going to do? And so this opportunity with MoFi puts me into a different maybe product type or style or price points to explore. And with the possibility eventually of doing high-end again. And I miss doing the high-end. Just from a point of view of sort of having no limits on what you choose to try and do. Because it's kind of money, no object, sort of. It's not literally true because you've still got competition at high-end, just as you have at any other price point. But it's certainly a different take on what you're going to think about creating. The low-cost speakers are, in a way, just as much of a challenge because you've got no money to work on to produce as best sound as you can at that price point. But, I've spent now 6 years designing, well, more if you count the last few years at Pioneer. We're doing that very low-cost Pioneer speaker that started out at $99 a pair, and the Mark II version is $129 a pair. So I've spanned 1,000 to 1 price point in my career. But you could say the last 10 of it has been doing all the really budget-oriented. So, coming to MoFi, just as when we started ELAC, we weren't going to do a $129 speaker because that already existed. And people were always coming up to me saying, when are you going to do something a bit more expensive? Because I want to spend more and get a bit more. And judging by what you could do at $129, what can you do at the next price point upwards? I launched the debut about $250, next natural price point, and that took off. I had done ELAC the Adante, which that's in a price territory that is more to the lower end of the mid-range price points, and it was fun doing that. So I'm looking, maybe that's where I start. So that I can have a bit more money to play with and do something a lot better than a $250 speaker. And again, there'd be no point in changing to a new company and then going, well, I'm going to do the other debut, right? I'm going to compete directly with what I've just released. Why would I do that?
Right.
The debut and all its variants and the Unify and all its variants exist. They are still just as good, even if I'm not at the company, than they were when I was at the company. Right? Nothing changed. They're still great value. And I still pop in on the ELAC Owners Club, all these Facebook pages and make comments. And I'm not going to stop that, because they're my product and people love them and want to know about them. So anytime I can help out, I always make comments and things. I lurk on a lot of these Facebook groups, and people get surprised when suddenly I pop up with an answer and they, oh, Andrew Jones is lurking on here. It's because it's in my blood.
Yeah.
It is my profession, but I started as a hobbyist and I still have that feeling. And I'm like, DIY audio project on one of the Facebook groups. I'm always on there helping answer questions. And there's a few of us. There's Lars Risbo, the Purify guy. There's Jack Ockley Brown from KEF. And we all get together and try and help each other out. And it's wonderful to feel that you're in the community of all the other guys in this industry are trying to do exactly what I'm doing, which is design speakers in different price ranges and we're theoretically competitors. But it doesn't stop us collaborating in helping people. And even when I was at KEF was a great university in that sense. And it was almost mandatory that every month there was a lecture series in London held by the Audio Engineering Society. And this is where I got to meet lots of the luminaries in the industry. But there'd be all the engineers from KEF, the engineers from Bowers & Wilkins, occasionally the engineers from Wharfdale. They had kind of further to go. We'd come to this lecture and we'd all go out to this particular restaurant afterwards for dinner. And Peter Walker and Peter Baxendale and the lecturer, and we'd all just chit chat, and you'd be sat with Peter and you'd be discussing. You discuss ideas. You try and keep it generalized, so you're not discussing about particular speakers that you're working on, but general engineering concepts involved in speakers and engineering. And I'd have a chat with Peter Walker. And then I could guarantee a couple of days later, I'd get a phone call. Oh, hi, Andrew, it's Peter here. I was thinking about what you said at dinner the other night. And then he'd just give this beautiful explanation of what he thought was going on and how to tackle it. That was the community. So I've wanted that to continue. So I'm always out there to try and help. And even at this show, 2 of the rooms are the rooms that sell drivers and parts to the hobbyist speaker community. So I was hanging out there with the guys and drinking beer after hours and chit-chatting. I like doing that. Anyway, so from that diversion, we get to, so now I'm thinking through what projects to do with MoFi, and we'll be announcing soon, it's that soon only not yet kind of thing, that we thought this was the opportunity to let people know where I'd gone to, kill the speculation. There's various polls online of where is Andrew going, and I think what seemed to be winning was JBL. And I go, well, sort of been there, done that, because Infinity was part of the Harman Empire, and like we were just chatting about earlier, it got absorbed into the Harman complex in Northridge. So I worked there for 3 years, so I kind of not going back to doing that. I basically said on one interview, you're all trying to guess where I was going. Nobody got it right. And I think nobody did expect MoFi. They weren't thinking that way, thinking other speaker companies. I said on this interview, so nobody won the date with me because no one got the right answer. If you're well known for anything, where do you go if you want to make a change and try something? Do you go to an existing speaker company, but they already have their engineers, or they had somewhat a high-profile person who was driving their direction? How do you change their culture, or do you fit your ideas into their culture? And there was a bit of that with ELAC, because there was already a culture of ELAC Germany. So we kind of got around that by saying, well, ELAC Americas is, first of all, to try and build up the American market and design products that really will work well there. And that was price points that was lower than what Germany was doing. So that kind of all worked out. Otherwise, if it's a well-known speaker company, how do you fit in? And do you go in and say, yeah, I know I've joined you, but I don't like what you're doing. I want to change it. That doesn't really work. So the other way is go into a company that, well, you either start your own, and there was certainly speculation there's going to be the Andrew Jones Speaker Company. But that's difficult. That's not my natural capability. I design speakers. I want to be coddled in a company so that my responsibility is designing speakers. I don't have to think about selling it in that sense, or where's the finance coming from, or anything like that. So it's easier to go into an established, successful company that isn't doing speakers, but has a desire to do so. And it's also important to go into a company that just has an atmosphere of being fun to be in with great people. And I'd already knew that about MoFi because, as I say, they sold the Pioneer speakers, they sold the ELAC speakers. In fact, Music Direct was the first people to sign up to sell that ELAC debut speaker when we launched. So it looked to be a great fit in order to try something different. So that's where I am. So we made the announcement that that's where I've ended up, and product announcement will come when I know, let's say, 90% certainty of what the production dates are. Because you don't want to tease. I know we've teased me, where's Andrew gone, for quite a while, but we don't want to keep teasing about, showing something about the product and then, okay, so when's it coming out? When, you've shown something of it, why isn't it ready yet? And in the current world with supply chain issues and pricing issues and availability, some things are uncertain for a lot of people as to how quickly you can get things done. So we want to just make sure that we know it's ready before we say it's ready, and we don't kind of fail on our promises. So I'm 90% of the way there towards production, tooled up pretty much all the parts. So all the drivers and everything that I'm developing, all custom, custom tooled cones, custom surrounds, new magnet structures, all sorts of things. Doing the fine tuning of it and listening to the different prototypes, making those decisions, and then we can move to production very soon. So it will be this year, and so availability. So we'll announce what's happening, middle of the year-ish.
Has supply chain affected the launch date? As in, if we were in a pandemic, would the timeline have been a little bit sooner than it currently is? Or have you guys worked that into the current launch timeline?
We've worked current conditions into the timeline.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, it has affected things. Just from the point of view getting even parts for prototypes.
Wow.
Everybody's scrambling. And so when you're trying to get started with parts and getting to suppliers to machine, before you even tool up, trying to get parts machined, it just takes longer than it used to. And on top of that, I'm working with some new factories on new projects, and you've got to establish a relationship and a belief that you really are going to move to manufacturing and just not messing around building a few parts and then you never give them the business. It was funny because we've hired someone who is our representative in China. This woman who lives over there but used to be in America. She was representing a factory like 20 odd years ago when I was at Pioneer. And so she's still doing all of that. So I contact her and say, are you available to kind of help me find, work with the factories, and so I can be calling you and then you go to the factory and sort things out? Because we can't go to China right now.
Yeah.
Because it's 2 weeks quarantine. I'm terrible with food, for example, and I'm not very adventurous. And one of my greatest fears with this quarantine thing, they choose a hotel. You don't get to choose the hotel to quarantine in. They put you in a hotel, basically lock you in your room. 3 times a day, they deliver food. You couldn't choose from a menu. They just deliver food, and they knock on the door, leave it outside. Then you have to wait about 10 minutes before you're allowed to open the door and pick up the food. And then every day they come and give you a COVID test. And I thought, I couldn't survive 2 weeks like that. I'd be starving to death because I'd open up the food and think, no, thank you. That's not me. So, and of course, losing 2 weeks before you can even do what you came over to do. And suppose you get COVID, you can't come back. It's not just can you go over there, can you get back until all your tests show negative. So too much uncertainty about traveling. So now I've got somebody over there that I trust. I've known for years. They know how I work. But the factory did ask them the other day, how well do you know this Andrew Jones? And she was saying, really well. I've known him for over 20 years. He's worked for Care for Infinity and Pioneer and stuff. Why are you asking? And they go, well, he seems to know what he's doing. And it was just it was because I'm telling them everything about, like, even the magnet structures, top plate thickness, gap dimensions, turns on the coil, overall mass of the voice coil form and mass of the cone and tooling up the cone, all this kind of stuff. And they often don't expect that. Too many people who manufacture in China these days are just saying, well, I've seen this. Can you kind of copy it and give me one of those? So the good thing is this particular factory is really on the ball with doing design work. And when I give them these unusual magnet structures, they actually do a full finite element analysis of it and then give comment on what I've done. Like, well, this isn't really using the magnet material efficiently. And I'm going, I know. there's another reason why I've designed it this way. I'm not going to tell you what that reason is, but it's okay, just trust me. But it's interesting, you have to get this balance between trust me, do what I say, but on the other hand, when you're not at the factory and you're doing something that's difficult to put together and it's causing issues, if I was there, I could immediately say,
right,
okay, look, I know it's difficult. Why don't we change this, or give me a suggestion as to how you think you want to try and put it together, and I'll okay a modification to the design that I know won't affect the things that I care about, but it will make it easier. Those conversations are not easy when you're not there in front of people.
Right.
So again, that's part of why I have a representative there. But it's these things when you're trying to develop something interesting and new that you have to work through, and extends development time, but it's worth it in the end.
This idea that you were talking about with moving to MoFi, of having a fresh slate in a way to kind of reinvent yourself, your brand, and obviously your products. Is this something that has evolved over time, or is something that is new to the way you think about it? Or is this kind of the reasoning for each of the moves that you've made in your career? So like, were your needs and or wants, have they evolved over time, or is it a consistent need for kind of just, I need a fresh thing to kind of do a fresh thing in?
I don't think I'm looking to reinvent myself. All I'm doing is looking for outlets for kind of playing with different things. Things have been in my mind, or things that weren't appropriate for one manufacturer's direction. I have to leave, just warming up on the stove in my brain until such time that I find an outlet for it. I mean, it's funny, I'd come up with some interesting ideas for how to do an electrostatic speaker, just because. And, I was never in a company that was ever going to do anything like that, so I just kept it on the back burner in my brain. And then a good friend of mine who's a speaker driver engineer, he came up with the same idea and patented it, which is, right? And, that's always the thing. You have an idea. If you don't patent it, someone might come up with the same idea. And he did, and he patented it. Okay, that's how the game works. That's okay. But I did tell it, I would call him up when I saw he'd patented it, and I said, that's a really brilliant idea. Yeah, I know. I said, yeah, I thought of it years ago. and then said, but I couldn't do anything about it. I said, so you owe me a free license if I ever need to use it. Which, of course, he doesn't owe me a free license. But, so, like I said, you've always got these ideas. I wish I could remember all these ideas I must have in my sleep, because my wife often says, you were dreaming last night. And whenever you're told you were talking in your sleep, you go, what did I say? What did I say? So you go, you were talking about speakers. Okay.
Did you write it down? Did you write it down? What if there's a genius idea?
Write down, yeah. So with MoFi have some ideas of where they'd like to be taking their product categories, including speakers. And I have some ideas that are compatible with that, and technology-wise, they would not have thought of, because they're not speaker engineers, clearly. But I can then, it's like when I said, research is, if I knew what I was doing, it wouldn't be research. The best way to do things with research is you're continually working on ideas, independent of anyone who's working on product, whether it's a different group within your company that are the product engineers, or whether it's even yourself that is doing both research and development. But you think up these ideas, test them to a certain stage, and put them on the shelf. It's like you've got a library. And then when you're thinking of a new product and you start working out what could this product be, you go, oh, there's an idea up on that shelf that might be worthwhile for this product. You take it down, you dust it off, you check it's still relevant, and it's ready to transfer from the research phase to the development phase. So that's what you do. You're presented with well, we have a need for doing this general theme of something. And you go, I wonder which of my ideas is the best one for that, or do I have to create a new idea, from the start? And that then gets the creative juices flowing, and I start thinking, and I start having fun. And as we said before, what I care about is always thinking about ideas and experimenting and trying things, and then making them work, and then seeing people enjoy the results. That's what gets me up in the morning. Stops me retiring.
Yeah, I mean, I find it really interesting and very refreshing myself to meet someone like you who seems to have found the beautiful balance between work and passion and having fun. Because you could, retire. You could just sit on a beach, right, somewhere drinking a Corona, like in a Corona commercial, and just do that thing. But it seems like if you're dreaming about speaker design in your sleep, this is something that you are absolutely passionate about.
It's sad. Come on, be honest.
I think that focus in life is better than being too diverse. Like the idea of the Renaissance man who knows a little bit about everything. To me, I don't know if it's as great as being really, really good at one thing, which I don't think that anyone would argue that you've unlocked, that not something that not many people could really get get to that level of. So,
Well, to be fair, I was also good at English folk dancing and won competitions, so there's that. But my body certainly can't do that now, so I've got to concentrate solely on speakers. But also, you see, all my mentors, Laurie Fincham McKeff and Peter Walker and everybody, they went through into their 80s still creating. I mean, actually, I'm working with Laurie on a project right now. He's 80. He can't do what he did do, and in fact, I got a lot of test gear from him. I'm a test gear collector. I got so many B&K microphones and oscillators and everything. Just love playing with them. But we're working on a little project to help educate people about, DIY people about speaker design, all the processes that you go through. So he's still thinking about it, and I plan to keep on doing that just because I've never lost that passion from when I first got started in the pre-teens. And I count myself very fortunate. Like I say, some people are Renaissance people, others are focused, others never really find out what their real passion is, or at least they're not able to work daily in something that is their passion. So you work to live, to fund your passions. I managed to combine them together and never lost that interest. So I count myself supremely fortunate.
I'd like to point out that second part that you just said, that you never lost your interest, because there are so many things that can kind of get in the way of that pure combination. And I do think that there are people who dedicate their lives to the things that they love, but that love diminishes once they start to do the thing for work that used to be for fun. Now, speaker design isn't really... there are DIYers who do it for fun, but it's a little more project-oriented. It's a little more ROI infused than, let's just say, unfortunately, playing the guitar is not... There's not much ROI on playing the guitar. Speaker design at least creates something that's more easily sellable. But even that, people's interests wane, people's enjoyment of the thing deteriorate as it becomes more work. And that's why I'm saying this is a unique and beautiful situation to dream about speaker design. It's a perfect metaphor for something that so many people aspire to but never actually attain.
But I mean, also involved in that is clearly I love talking about what I'm doing, right? And with COVID, coming to this show, I always, I used to come to every show. I was in the room demoing all day long just because I kind of like showing off, to be honest. But I missed these shows, and I was longing to get to a show. And when the opportunity and with MoFi to make the announcement, but to come to AXPONA, I was able to just keep walking, and I didn't have my product to demonstrate any longer. So I was able to just walk around and, like a hobbyist, keep going into all the different rooms and listening to everything, but also then to find all the people that I've missed seeing for 2 years and chat with them. So, yeah, it's still my passion.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your time, and I'm really looking forward to see what's next. So after we get off the air, you're going to tell me, right?
Of course. Not.
The Occasional Podcast is a production of the Part-Time Audiophile Network, which includes PartTimeAudiophile.com, The Occasional Magazine, the PTA Newsletter, and AudioHead.com. You can stay in touch with us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. The Occasional Podcast is produced and hosted by Brian Hunter, executive produced by Scott Hall at PTA Productions. If you haven't already, please subscribe to The Occasional Podcast on iTunes, Google, Spotify, or wherever your favorite podcasts are downloaded.